Good evening, I'm Dale Spalding with Laramie the Reading Gorilla on the Reading Gorilla Podcast. For tonight's episode, we'll be reading another short story from Parker Yancey, author of The Fox Child from one of our earlier episodes. And we'll introduce two poems written by a new author to the podcast. Tonight's episode is called Past Regret, Future Hope. The Reading Gorilla Podcast is a family-oriented production. Some portions of our content tonight may be confusing to younger listeners, but parents might find these creative works of some help when explaining death, family, and seeking help for past mistakes. Lee Woke Up Dead by Parker Yancey. Lee woke up dead. Always an unexpected occurrence, to be sure, but he shrugged it off. He only had the opportunity once a year. He stretched as best he could in his coffin, bones clicking and cracking against one another. That was all he was, for now, but Lee couldn't wait to get above ground. He rapped his knuckles on the wood, and the hollow echo would have made him smile if he wasn't already permanently smiling. He began to unclasp the latches that held his resting place closed, and with each click he felt energy return to him, muscles reforming on his limbs, and organs growing in his ribcage. It happened so quickly that by the time he opened the doors of his coffin, his heart was already beating. He felt eyeballs return to his head, and he blinked to make sure they worked properly. His dark eyes scanned the area around his resting place. The fronds of the hang trees, covered in a light frost, waved gently in the slight breeze, and orange light shone on the horizon, announcing the departure of day. Lee looked up, and, yep, there it was, the tree that he had fallen out of 3 years ago. He frowned, lips having finally formed over his grinning teeth. He must have woken up early. Well, at least his coffin was above ground. He reached up to touch his head, fingers running through wild black hair. Yep, the crack was still there. It was smaller, of course, but it would be a while before his death mark faded. Lee felt bad for the ones that had been crushed or burned to death. They had it rough, taking decades before they were fully formed again. Of course, he couldn't remember any names. The details of the after were always blurry at best. The blue lines in the ground wove in traceries around him, and Lee supposed he might as well just wait until they arrived. There was a brown cloak on the ground next to the coffin, and he scooped it up and wrapped it around himself. He sighed deeply, savoring the feeling of breath moving through his new lungs, and let it out luxuriously. The smells of the distant village were too faint for him to pick out, but he could smell the recently upturned earth around his coffin and the sap of the tree above him. Life was so nice. He wasn't sure which he preferred, life or death, but life was fleeting, darting. Something darted in the corner of his vision. He spun, and there was nothing. The light from the sun as it sank seemed to grow cold, colder than the winter air around him. He stood up shakily, his remade muscles barely remembering how to walk. If a wolf or bear attacked him, he would be fine. He was already dead. But if it was a dire... Lee shrunk in on himself, hugging the cloak closer to himself, turning shakily. A flash of color exploded out at him from behind the tree, blurred with its speed. He cried out, stumbling from his coffin to the bare earth, and a warm, small body landed on him. "Brother!" it cried happily, snuggling against him. The blue line of the awake hovered a handspan from his face. Lee gave a sigh of relief and pressed Dowie closer to him. "I love you too, but be careful. I almost passed the line." "Oh, sorry." He scrambled up, the small, wild-haired boy's grin fading nervously. "Where is it?" "It's fine, Dowie. It's all good. I'm not dead. Yet." Dowie's smile returned, and his face lit up with laughter. "No, you're not." Lee sat up and pointed at the coffin vehemently. An exasperated sigh. "Well, I guess you're..." Lee fixed him with a sharp gaze. Someone hasn't been listening to his lessons. "No, I have, I promise," he protested. "It's just so complicated and weird, and He shivered, looking down ashamedly. "The dire-scape scares me." Lee looked at him, then out at his arms, drawing his living brother close. He had been 4 when Lee had died. "They scare me too," he whispered softly. "But now I'm dead, and you living folk have to worry about it. Besides, they don't like bright little souls like you. Don't taste too good." He ended with a smile, and Dowie smiled in return. "How's everybody?" "Well, Maru's still courting Kai." Lee's eyes shot open. Still? That's at least a year. Dowie giggled, and Lee continued, feigning anger. They better get those ribbons on their wrists before I tell Kai's mother to haunt them. Oh, Dowie exclaimed excitedly. Guess what? Corey's a seeker now. Shock exploded through Lee's head, and he leaned forward. Last year she had announced her desire to be in the Death Guard, but already? She's only 16. Did they lower the age? How? What? She's 17, Dowie corrected with an upraised finger. She should have reached the Citadel just last week. Corey wanted to wait, but they ordered her to come. She's sorry, Dowie finished in a small voice. It's not your fault, Lee stated, rubbing his death mark thoughtfully. I'm just surprised is all. Yeah, it surprised Mom and Dad too, Dowie said. Wait, why are you here so early? Where's everybody else? His brother smiled guiltily. Well, I kind of came ahead. I wanted to see you, he pleaded, and Lee's severe expression softened. He placed a hand on Dowie's shoulder, the texture of his leather garment strange between his renewed fingers. Brother, I thank you for your love, but I don't want to wake next year to find that my little brother is a white. Understood? Dowie nodded slowly. I understand, brother. Lee smiled and caught his brother's eyes and sat down heavily. And I'm happy for Corey, don't get me wrong, and thank you for coming to see me. Do you get lonely? He burst out. Lee considered. He couldn't remember much, but he remembered enough. No. There's a lot of dead up there, but I do miss my family. Dowie sat next to him and leaned his head on Lee's shoulder. We miss you, he whispered. As long as you do, I'll keep coming, Lee said softly. Through the darkening trees he saw a line of torches approaching. His family. They only had one night, but Lee would make it count. Stained by Matthew Sortome. Dipped in deep, shivering, cold limbs. Hands grab and grip, slithering sustenance slips away. For a breath's grasp, dive deeper in, but you can't hold long enough. Lungs quiver and quake for air, a pull of oxygen fresh and clear, but you'll lose hold, lose sight, lose the chance for the thrill down below. Wade in, plunge, dive, reach, thrash. And all for a heartbeat, hold it. A thrill you can't compare, a warmth you crave, a rush you can't save. Electricity crackles through your nerves just at the touch. Then it's gone, writhes away, vanishing within this abyss, a darkness you never see, slipping away. You can never keep it long enough. Throat choked with liquid and stale air, heart pounding through your chest as a mallet. You claw up, thrash in the mire, suffocating. Breathe, breathe. Crawl to shore, weak limbs pulling through grimy sand. Lull your head to let tongue taste bile and grit. Sludge oozes down your skin, reeking of decay, choking your sense to a bleak haze. No, it wasn't worth it. Why? 'Cause you wanted it. Why dive? 'Cause it was weaker to fall than to climb, and fall it was. A dip, a plunge, a taste, a glance. However much you could grasp, which never can stay. Stained. The sun cannot dry the silt, cannot crack the residue, smothered in it, wallowed in it, swallowed enough to be bathed in the bile, only to be vomited back. It doesn't even want to keep what throws itself down its gullet. Can't be satisfied, can't satisfy. Retched back to shore, saturated in grime of your own choice. Stained. Nearly beyond recognition. Quick, before the sun rises to illuminate your squalor. Hide the wounds of your demise. Rake at hands, tear flesh from bone, anything to scrub clean the black. Grating, harrowing, scourging. Can any acid bite hard enough? There, draw tightly coat and jacket. Hands clear as once they were. Lips tremble, wiped to their natural hue. Eyes wince as nostrils pull deep a breath. Cleaned, wiped, stained. The sun rises to warm your face, wiped of the debris. Skin warmed by light. Pull your cloak tight. What they can see is right, but concealed is the blight. Stained. Couldn't dig deep enough, couldn't gouge out the dross, couldn't peel free the skin stained deep. Stained. Clinging, it chills. The faint breeze shivers your spine, festering, it kills. Heart beats shallow. It never left, was never removed. Still it congeals deep in the grooves, carved in the mind from the dam you burst, for that rush of the flood. That flood which blasted away the mind, didn't need to feel, didn't need to think. It filled holes you left unfilled, so there it stays. Stained. It will dry you up, crack into dust, blow away as unwanted rust. The lie can't live. It never does. But its corpse parades on cause. A placebo hurts less than amputation. This limb you keep. This hollow leg is never filled, can't be satiated from what you've killed. Stained. Deep through to the pore. Stained. Because as before, you'll be hungry for more. Purged by Matthew Sortome. There's a pair of hands marked deep through the bone, pierced through by black stakes. These hands were bound, thrust against the tree, and held aloft, the world the marks to see. Those hands lifeless fell, where they pried free the gruesome nails carved through, broken and stained red with blood and sin sustained. Those hands rested in stone, pitch blackness that hid the scene. The sun hid its face, refused to cast light. Could it illuminate such a crime? Could the world such a stain? The stones rent in pain. Days those hands slumped, lifeless. In darkness their marks hid from view. Many remembered the crowds they drew, the sight granted by a touch, the voices gained to sing the event, the ears filled from heaven's advent. Those hands slumped, lifeless, stained deep with pain incomprehensible. Those hands fed multitudes. Those hands expelled demons. Those hands succored victims. Those hands rebuked hypocrites. Those hands held the world. Looking down, you can't see your hands from stains. Filthy without purpose, filthy without worth. Sin blots your eyes. These hands killed the love. These hands choked the heart. These hands dug the filth. These hands chose the sin. These hands are stained. Yet those pierced hands still will take them, will hold the blighted fingers and raise them up. Those pierced hands, once dripping blood, will grasp your weary arms, black from the mire. Those pierced hands, once bound to the stake, gladly were marked for your eternal sake. Those pierced hands reach eternal, the depths of the mire. They know. They descended beyond the abyss. They took hold of that which was impure and bled the price. Blood beyond worth. Blood divine. Blood pure. Your stained hands cringe, away you recoil. How can such purity forgive this filthy oil? Those pierced hands take yours, radiant stars against the dross. They were once his. He took the cost. Come unto me, those hands beckon. Stains, however black as coal, can become white and whole. The stains hurt, they bleed, festered so long it comes off as skin. The strong lie burns flesh. You cry, whimper for relief, yet those pierced hands lay on the cure, a searing pain that can make you pure. Purged, a radiance you long had forgotten. Had ever skin been brighter than black? Oil drains and seeps away at your feet. Had ever skin been white as snow? Purged. Those pierced hands hold your own. Deep scars against your